science here now is indisputable, that thoughts, that emotions affect the organs of the body.
We have to be mindful with every single thought that we have every single day. How do we want to create our heaven or our hell? How do we treat one another? Because we are the source of everything within us.
There is a poem by Rumi called The Guest House, which in many ways describes the human journey.
This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Repressing our anger may seem like a good solution, but pretty soon we run out of places to hide. Divorce, stress at work, financial trouble or tension within our families provoke the shadow until finally it erupts. The ancient Vedic text known as the Bhagavad Gita states that man should discover his own reality, not thwart himself, for he has himself as his only friend or as his only enemy. But if he rejects his own reality, the self will war against him. It's easy to love yourself when you wake up feeling strong and worthy and you have enough money in the bank and you feel great. But how do you love yourself when you feel broke or when you've been hurt or abused?
And that sets up the conflict, which as we get older, those wonderful forces that we've locked up in our shadow are rattling the cages. And sometimes if we're distracted, they sneak out and we think, and the people around us think, what were we thinking? And the answer is we weren't thinking.
When we're pressed, the shadow can look like this. We have to resolve the undigested emotions that are buried in our bodies and lodged as stress in our minds. We have to unearth, own, and embrace the very parts of ourselves that have caused us the most pain. And the moment we do, the light of our awareness will begin the process of transforming them. We think we're alone. We think we're different. We feel isolated or abandoned. And then when we come together, we find out that we all go through traumas, that to be human is to be challenged, and that everyone has gone through some trauma. And if we're courageous, we see that there is gold to be mined in every experience.
It's very interesting because I don't remember a single day where my mother was not drunk. and I had to live through this. And I didn't understand it. Very, very confused by it all. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Who are you? Because as she would drink and as she became into that space, I knew I didn't know her. And I just wished she was dead. I said, I wish you were dead. Wish you were dead. I wanted the pain out of my life, Because you don't belong here. Whoever you are, this intoxicated person, and as a child looking at this, because my father wasn't there either, I had to figure this out. But all I did was wish she was dead, right? Well, not until 30, 40 years later, after she had passed over, she lived many, many years after that, and after getting involved in this work, I realized that that was indeed one of the most incredible blessings of my life. I learned from that situation about compassion, and I learned about forgiveness. And that's a pretty big one to have to learn about forgiveness. We see these things as horrific experiences, terrible experiences, dark experiences, when in truth, they're really enlightened experiences because they help us to be who we are. They help us to be compassionate. They help us to be forgiving. They help us to look at someone very, very differently.
What doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
At a certain point in life, it's about saying, I have been through what I've been through. I've succeeded in some ways, perhaps, but I've also failed in some ways. I've been strong at times, but I've also been weak at times. I've gotten some things right, and other things I've gotten wrong. And some things have gone well for me, and some things have been damn awful. The issue is, what am I going to do with all of that? Two people can go through the exact same situation on an external level, but internally they do two completely different things with it. That's why we read incredible stories about people who went through the Holocaust or people who were victims of genocide and yet they survived, and yet they go on to live extraordinary lives. And then you meet other people who went through a fraction of that in terms of an internal trauma, but they stay stuck in it forever. We begin to ask ourselves, what am I getting from staying stuck there? What am I avoiding from staying stuck there? And what we are avoiding is the greatest challenge of all, and that is to be who we can be in order to serve the world.
I asked a few people to share their own shadow stories. Some of them are complete, others are ongoing. All of them are portraits of a fearless commitment to transformation. Sui is like that beautiful combination of a miracle, that part of her that she deems so worthless and unlovable actually comes bearing the greatest gifts and makes her the shining light that she is today.
The pain that I've been carrying throughout my life was the pain of believing that I was abandoned by my parents because I wasn't pure enough. I'm actually mixed in terms of, half Japanese, half Chinese. I was considered mixed and impure enough to be raised in Japan. My parents live in Japan and they left me with my grandparents in Malaysia. I just felt so abandoned and rejected. My father ended up getting a divorce from my mother. He remarried another Japanese woman, but nobody ever told me that when my father came back with his wife, that she's not my mother. I felt the immediate rejection, that they didn't want me in their lives, and that they would rather have, 2 dogs than have me with them. Because I have always discarded my Japanese identity in favor of my Malaysian Chinese identity. I felt like the country has betrayed me, and I used that pain to really put it into my work. I heard the project was in trouble in Japan, and I volunteered to go to Japan to fix this problem because I know that I could do it. That one day I stepped into Tokyo, and I just felt that this is where I need to be to really discover and explore the Japanese half of me. In less than 3 years, I created a business from $40 million to over $200 million in a country dominated by men. Never heard of a half Japanese, half Chinese woman being the business leader in a big US telecom world. So I couldn't be the leader I am today without going through the emotions and the pain that I went through my whole life.
If we look deeper, we will see that we all have a divine recipe. All of us have shame about things that have happened to us. We've all gone through difficult times. We address these issues so we can quiet our minds, heal our bodies, and get closer to our heart's desires. Hector had to let go of his macho persona to make peace with the one that he loved the most, which was his father.
My father was your traditional Mexican man in the sense of working hard, wanting to get ahead, wanting to provide for his family. And as a young boy, I was looking for his love. I wanted his attention. The challenge was trying to figure out what was wrong with me, because obviously something's wrong with me. If, number one, he's not giving me the attention I want as a little boy, not giving me the love, yelling at me, being verbally abusive, obviously I did something wrong, there's something wrong with me. So I carried that story from that point on for a long time. And I realized he probably wasn't going to do it the way I wanted. He probably wasn't going to tell me what I wanted when I was a little boy. Mi hijo te quiero, te adoro, I love you, son. I did some personal growth work. I went inside, looked at the shame, the guilt, the pain. I went through that, I healed that. And I was able to have that forgiveness with my dad and let that go. I wasn't going to tell him I love you for him. I was going to tell him I love you for me. My dad passed on. And I'm really grateful that I listened to that inner voice that said, go ahead and tell your dad that you love him. Do it for yourself.
Dr. Edie Eger is one of the most beautiful divine women on the planet today. And she survived the worst circumstances, something that most of us can't even ever imagine.
May 22nd, 1944, when I arrived in Auschwitz, there was chaos. My father was separated from us, and my sister and I facing Dr. Mengele. I didn't know who he was until later. And he pointed to my mom to go to the left and my sister and I to the right. I asked the inmate, when will I see my mother? And she pointed at the chimney, and fire was coming out of the chimney. And she said, you better talk about your mother in past tense, she's burning there. My sister and I hugged each other and said, the spirit never dies, the spirit never dies. I remember that so vividly, even today. In Auschwitz, we didn't know when we took a shower whether water is going to come out or gas. And then there were others who ran into the barbed wires, they got electrocuted. And that night, Dr. Mengele came to the barracks and wanted to be entertained. And my friends who knew that I was a very talented gymnast, and so they volunteered me, and I ended up dancing for Dr. Mengele. I closed my eyes, and the music was Tchaikovsky, and I was dancing in Budapest, the Romeo and Juliet. I completely dissociated, and we had choices. I chose to look at the guards, that they were more in prison than I was. I remember they took my blood about twice a week, and I asked, why are you taking my blood? And the man said, I'm taking your blood to aid the German soldiers so we can win the war. I said to myself, I was a pacifist, I was a ballerina, I bet with my blood you're never gonna win the war. So I created a part in me that I was able to still be in charge of and not allowing anything what happened externally to murder my spirit. I remember I said, if I survive today, then tomorrow I'll be free.